Hello and welcome to Occupied Thoughts, a podcast brought to you by the Foundation for Middle East Peace. I'm Peter Beinart, a fellow at the Foundation. Today is December 23rd, 2024, and I'm glad to be here with Atalya Ben-Abba and Mattan Helman. Atalya Ben-Abba is the media manager for the Refusal Solidarity Network, running the page at Voices Against War. She refused to enlist in the Israeli army in 2017 and spent 110 days in the military prison because she wanted to publicly condemn the Israeli occupation and not take part in its practices. She's been an activist for the past 10 years, working mainly in Jerusalem and the West Bank. Mattan Helman is the executive director of Refusal Solidarity Network. Mattan also spent 110 days in Israeli prison for refusing to join the Israeli army and refusing to oppress Palestinians as part of the army. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Atalya,
having
maybe
me.
let me just start with you. Maybe you can just talk about why you made this decision not to serve and to talk about what the consequences were like for you.
So when I made the decision, I was doing like this year of the civil service, living in a commune with 17 other people that were meant to enlist together. And we had all these seminars about how enlisting is like this way of taking social responsibility and how we need to think about like social moral and the way that we affect society. And I think these like sort of seminars really made me think about this like doing an action that has meaning for my wider society and that has public meaning. And that made me want to refuse because refusing allowed me to do something publicly and to reach like a wider group of people and to have a message that is more than me choosing something for my own morality or my own reasons. Um,
Interesting. And I tell you what were can you talk about the consequences of what happened when you said I'm not going to serve?
It was difficult, specifically for like this group of people that I lived with. I had to sort of quit the group, and I couldn't stay in contact with them. Specifically after they enlisted, it sort of just became impossible because we had such different worldviews and experiences of like what we were doing at the time. I became an activist in the Jordan Valley, going with like this group that did protective presence with shepherds in the West Bank, and just I just sort of started to build this community of activists and walk away from my previous community.
And Matan, can you talk about your decision to refuse to serve and then about the consequences you faced?
Yeah, I was like wondering also by myself, like when it actually started and when it's actually I got to this decision. But I think in general, like I was born as not Jewish in Israel. I was born and raised in a kibbutz, and my mother she's not Jewish, so I'm not Jewish as well. And also when I was like in the bar mitzvah time, it's like the time when I understood, I'm kind of different from everyone else. Like everyone are Jewish, they celebrate it, and I do not because I'm not, and I can't because of it. And that's like, I understood that I'm different from everyone else, and people start also a bit like my peers look at me a bit differently. And in that kind of moment, I kind of realized that I can choose if I want to be like everyone else, or I can take more critical point of view of my society, and I think like that's the direction that I went. So it was easier for me to look critically on the society. And when I was 15, it was the same youth movement that Atalya was part of, Hashomer Tza'ir. So they talked for the first time about the Israeli occupation, and I was in shock about it because everyone that I know go to the army, they are serving the army, and then discover that there is a whole system of oppression in the West Bank against people that different from us are not Jewish, and oppression of against the Palestinians. So I start to read about it more and also hear testimonies from the Breaking Silence. And by that I decided I don't want to be part of the army, but I didn't know what I can do. And I think it was 2014 when I was 16. And then was, I don't remember which war exactly. It was in Gaza, but one of the wars back then. And there was a guy named Udi Segal, which also refused back then. And then like I used for the first time for this idea to refuse and trying to take a political stand and raise awareness about what happened in the West Bank, what the Israeli society do there and the army is doing there. And so that's basically when I decided that's exactly what I want to do. It's not only to choose, not to take in part of it, but also to uh, use this position of refusing and maybe go to the prison because of that, and to raise awareness and try to make a difference. So that's when I chose to do it.
Thanks. Atalya, maybe you can just talk about, so when you were in prison for 110 days, maybe you can just talk about what is that experience like? What is the Israeli criminal justice system? How does it respond to people who refuse to serve?
So I think it's first important to note that it's not the criminal justice system that sentences refusers, because the way the system is run is that the refuser is already like a soldier. So the system that sort of deals with it is the military system. It's completely internal to the military. So once you refuse, you are taken into like military arrest center, and then you are being judged in front of a military official, and then you are sent to military prison. And the way it works is that because the refusal happens in this like state of like you're not yet a soldier, but you're already a part of the system, then there's also all sorts of limitations. So usually you can be sentenced only up to a month, but then after your sentence, you're not exempt from military service. So you need to refuse again. So it becomes this system where you spend your time in military prison, and then you come back and refuse again, and you are sentenced to another month, and then it keeps going, and there's actually no way of knowing how long it would take until they will finally give you an exemption.
I see. And so I think both of you, it was for 110 days, right? So Mattan, why did it end in 100? Then it's 110 days. They just said, okay, enough of this. Basically, we're not going to keep going through this process of making you refuse again and sentence you again. They get sick of it, or what? Why did it end at that time?
Yes, it's a bit hard to say, I think. It's very much related to the politics that the army trying to do. Like, it's very arbitrary. There's no specific date, as Atalya said. But basically, many refusers that are in prison, they're trying to get a conscientiousness committee. Like, they like to be conscientious objector, to be recognized. But that's almost impossible for most refusers to get it. And after 19 days, that at least was the rule back then. I'm not sure if it's still the same. Mostly you can ask for going to, I don't know how to translate it, but it's like a fit committee or suit committee, like if you're fit or suit to the army, like to be a soldier. And I don't know if I think Atalya got the same way, but I got it after 110 days, this committee. And basically they say, I'm not suited to be a soldier because of my seriously bad behavior. That's like the official reason that we got exempt.
Right.
Yeah, I got an exemption the same way.
Yeah. And the conditions go ahead, Mattan.
It's very like can change. Like I think after me there was not really refusers who were more than 100 days, but we saw that after the October 7th they mostly put people even more than 100 days. I think one of the last ones was 160 or 180 days even in prison.
And I tell you, what are the conditions like in prison, in the military detention? Are they different for men versus women?
Yes, but there are way less women prisoners in the military prison. It's like, I think, like 60 women for 600 men, something like that. So one of the biggest differences is that all the women are in the same department, or while the men are separated to like A, B, C according to their like seriousness of their offense.
Because not all people, just be clear, not all the people that you were in prison with were in prison because they were refusing to serve on. They could have just had some other infraction, right? They could have, just some other military violation, right?
Yeah, mostly weren't refusers.
Right.
Or like not for political reasons. Like
right.
At the time when I refused, we were 3 conscientious objectors in prison. But also very high percentages of the people in military prison are for like, I forgot like the proper English word, but it's like, trying to get away from service. It's
right.
just not for political reasons. Usually it's for economic reasons. So there's like a disproportionate representation of people from the Ethiopic community in military prison. It really tends to target people from very difficult socioeconomic backgrounds, because people choose to work instead of go to military prison, and also people have like a distrust of the state that is related to, like the racist police, and so it's not, it's not the way I felt it. It wasn't people who committed serious offenses, but it's still very much a prison, and it's like cells, and you wake up early and you clean. And I used to work a lot in the kitchen, like in the unit. But it it changed now, because Mattan and me, we were in there were 2 military prisons at the time. It was prison number 4 and prison number 6, but they closed both of them and opened like one bigger military prison that's called prison number 10.
And Mattan, what were the conditions in prison like for you in the men's prison?
Yes, it was a bit different because, like as Atalya said, she was in one cell with everyone, basically, and most refusers are going to area that's called Area A, the like Area A for males, and basically it's a bit more open. Like we have like a fence surrounding us, and it's open prison in that sense. Like it's open here, it's not in a cell, and we are sleeping in big tents of the U.S. Army, like a second-hand tents with holes and everything. So if it's rainy, it could rain on you if you're under the hole. The conditions very much, I would say, they treat you like a soldier, because the prison it's made for bad soldiers to bring them back to order. So they treat you like a soldier. You need to have all the soldiers rules, and also like you need to stand and move from one position to the other position and do those kind of things. So it's a lot of about order and make you straight, and in the end go back to the army.
Right.
So the condition, I would say, it's not good, but it's mostly like very harsh what we need, because it's not civilian.
Yes.
They don't treat us as civilian. And also you cannot do anything really there. So it's also very boring, but that's basically most of the condition there.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, Atalya, and you mentioned this in passing, but I'm just curious, you talk about, did you feel that once you became a public refuser, that you felt a tremendous amount of stigma? Like, I'm curious about the reaction from family, from friends, and also whether there was anyone who actually, any Jewish Israelis who actually came and said to you, whether it was in the military detention or otherwise, actually, that we sympathize.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think inside the military prison, I got a lot of sympathy because of like this basic instinct of resisting to the system.
Right.
Like a lot of the girls that I was with were like trying to encourage me and, telling me keep going, that keep fighting them, even though they completely disagreed with the reason that I was fighting them.
Interesting.
And yeah, it was this like general appreciation of resistance, less of like the, and I had a lot of very interesting conversations in there. But I think for like the general public, it's really difficult because for me, it was really a choice to become an outcast and also a choice to remain a political activist. Like I think like once I started that like way or like route of refusing, like it closes certain doors of like what I can do, but opens others. And especially I think in relation with like creating solidarity with Palestinians and creating joint resistance, it opens a lot of doors because it's like this first step for creating trust.
Yeah. I'm curious, just to stick with that, I'll tell you, were there any particular reactions from Palestinians to your refusal that were particularly memorable?
Yeah, a lot, especially because I had this like period of time after high school and after civil service, like this gap year, that I had like this time of just being an activist in the West Bank and creating these relations. And I had a good friend named Osama who was really encouraging for me. And he sent me letters while I was in military prison. And I felt like he was one of the people who gave me confidence, even though my family was really, really against it and were very, very scared of what would happen to me. He was one of the people who really encouraged me.
Matana, I wanted to ask the same thing. What was the first in kind of Jewish Israeli society? What was the response? How much stigma was there? What kinds of conversations did you have after you made this decision?
Yes, I had in the beginning, like I talked about it with my family, of course. Like my father, who was actually a combat soldier in the IDF, so he more understood me because he understood, like, it's not anymore fighting to defend Israel. It's between Israel against Egypt, the Egypt army. It's now like controlling civilians. It's about occupation, oppression. So he understood me more, but of course you don't want your son to be in prison. Like it's very, I think, normal reaction, and I understood him. But my mother and my father were a bit more against me in my decision in the beginning, at least. My mother wanted me to be like everyone else, like you don't want your son to be different. And my brother was like, why are you even living here if you don't going to defend your country? Like this kind of reaction. And we had like big fights. With my friends, I had like, they more accepted me because they knew me for quite long, and they're also a bit more, not sure how much to say progressive, but they can more even accept different ideas, even though they don't agree with it. But for example, in the youth movement that I was part of, so I also live in a commune like Atalya, in the same place even, and you live in a commune, you live like kind of in your own bubble society, place that people know each other, live with each other, and they decide basically to kick me out of the commune because I decided to refuse and not go to the army with them. So yeah, so I got both kind of reaction, and yeah, that was like really hard part. I remember in the decision to refuse, like also that I've been kicked out from a group of friends, and yeah, also like in the social media when I wrote a post about refusing, so you get maybe 500 messages I got from it, which 450 was like you're a Nazi, I wish you to death, and like cancer and those kind of stuff, and 50 of them was like supporting.
Yeah.
But one thing that I feel like I also want to, about what Atalya mentioned about the letters, like those, and there is still something that we're collecting letters for refusers, and also been received letters in prison. That's one of the most thing that strengthened me during that time, because the reason why I refuse it's in order to make an impact, in order to have a social change, to help to push one step to end of the occupation and to withdraw basically like cooperation and soldiers for doing the occupation. So like, no soldiers, there's no occupation. So to get a lot of letters of support and see that actually make a difference, because in
The
prison,
letters were from Jewish Israelis, from Palestinians, from people outside. Who were the letters?
from all over the world, like Israelis, from Palestinians, from internationals, really from everywhere. And yeah, that was something that really strengthened me, at least during the time in prison. And that's something that we also do as an organization. We're helping to collect letters to, support the refusers that are now in prison.
And what were the conversations that you had in military detention with the other? Was it similar to Atalya, that you had people who they were not politically opposed, but they also were kind of, they were hostile to the military, just not for political reasons, so they were more sympathetic? Or how did people respond to you in prison?
I would say quite similar. Like everyone's in prison kind of hate the army, not because of what the army do, but because they don't want to be part of the army, or they don't want the job they got in the army. They hate their commander and those kind of reasons. So they hate the system, basically. And those people like support me. But also, I think what was very interesting, that most the people in prison, it's right, I would say they're quite maybe right wing. It's like people who don't really ever encounter left-wing ideas that are not from social media or from TV or newspaper. So I had like interesting conversation regarding that. For example, I remember one conversation I had with someone that he asked me, "Oh, you're a lefty?" So I said like, "Yes, I'm a left." And then he was, "Okay, so you hate Jewish people, right? Like you want all of us to be killed." I'm like, "No, I don't hate Jewish people. Like I born with Jewish people, like live with Jewish people. I'm kind like half a Jew, you can say. So I don't hate Jewish people." So like, "Oh, so you hate the Palestinians?" So I'm like, "No, I don't hate the Palestinians. Like they are great and everything." So it's like, "Oh, so you're in the middle. You don't hate everyone. You love everyone." So like, if you want to call it like that, we can call it like that.
Right.
But
Right.
it's like to understand the mindset of many people in Israel that, kind of left wing, or to support Palestinians, many times in Israeli mind, it's to hate Jewish people or hate Israelis.
Yeah. Atalya, do you
I
have...
had very...
Go ahead.
I wanted to share that I had like very similar conversation where people told me, okay, so if you don't hate Jewish people, then you're not a radical leftist. I was like, I don't think you can hate someone more radical than refusers.
Yeah.
It's just like this humanized idea of what a left-wing person is.
Yeah. Mattan, how many, do you have data about how many people are refusing, and whether the numbers, there's been any shift in the numbers? Have they gone up and down, particularly since October 7th?
Yes, it's always a bit hard to say, but because we need to remember there's three different type of refusers, I would say. There is the draft refusers that till now it's around 5 till 7 a year, and that didn't change a lot during after October 7th.
5 to 7 people, that you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, so a tiny percentage of the,
Yes, but they are publicly. That's
right,
important to remember. They are the ones who go in, mostly they are being sent to prison and do a public campaign towards it.
Right.
And there's the reserve soldiers that there we see a big increase in the last months. Like there was one letter that went out in May of 40 reserve soldiers who decided to refuse. And now there is a new one that went out in the 10th of October, I think, this year. And it started with 130, and now it's approaching 200. It's like 190 something. And so we see here like, a big increase, because that was not exist before. And there is also the non-public ones, the ones who finding a different way to not to go to the military, and if it's say there's a psychological problem, or to say there's another issue that they cannot go to the army and they got permission for that. And this is like it's like kind of an iceberg. You see the ones who refuse publicly, but the ones who not, it's like under the water, you cannot see it.
Right.
But I got data that it's like people who help those kind of people, that it's increased a lot this year, but they don't have the exact number. It's like around 1,000.
Right, right.
Yeah, there are a
Right.
lot of people who just don't do military service, but don't do it publicly. And it's always been like a big, big percentage of Israeli society that don't enlist for like a lot of different reasons, and even those who do it politically but not publicly.
Right. And if you don't, if how easy is it to get out of if you don't make a public issue of it, how easy is it to get out of the military service just by basically, just saying you don't want to do it for whatever reasons, and how willing is the military to then just kind of let people out if people don't make a political, fuss about it?
So I think if you don't make a political statement at all, it tends to be easier. It's still a matter of luck. I mean, the most popular way is to go to like a mental health officer and make like a statement about your mental well-being, and that tends to be easy. Some people are still very unlucky, and it's very difficult for them. Some people are luckier, but they still need help to do it. And I think it's one of those ways that is way more accessible for people with money, because you can pay for a psychiatrist to give you like this specific medical thing that you can then take to the military. But that's the most accessible way. And there are also people who go to conscientious committees, but in this conscience committee, you cannot be political. Like, you can only talk about, pacifism and things that are very, very personal. Like, once you start to make also political statements, then you're most likely to not be able to get an exemption that way.
Right. Well, we're out of time, but I wanted to just say that, a lot of this reminds me of, that these issues came up in a very big way in the United States during the Vietnam War. And, in the decades later, I think that the people who went to Canada, or who you got a doctor to tell them that they couldn't fight, and, we have many of the American politicians like Donald Trump who did versions of this, right? Nobody, in retrospect, I think, feels particularly proud of that. But the much smaller number of people who did the equivalent of what you did, which was publicly say that they were against the war and be willing to go to jail for it, I think those people are now recognized in many segments of American society to have been doing something really heroic. And so I hope that one day, not just Palestinians, but or Israeli Jews can also see that you're doing something very courageous, and something that I think should be really honored. So thank you for doing this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you
so
for
much.
And for our audience, thanks
Good
for
day.
listening or watching. And finally, as always, I want to remind you to subscribe to the Occupied Thoughts podcast. You can do so on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Spotify. That way you won't miss any of the great content we're posting every week. And you can also find the podcast and a video of the podcast on our website, www.fmep.org. And with that, I'm Peter Beinart, signing off until the next episode of Occupied Thoughts.